We're talking about the Bills' chief problem, notable storylines from locker room cleanout day, and setting the tone for the offseason today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Reid podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Well, folks, welcome in. We got some different things I want to get into today. We'll start with some analysis on the Bills' chief problem, and then we'll get into some of the storylines from locker room cleanout day, and then we'll kind of set the tone for the offseason and work through the schedule and talk about, you know, some of the landmarks along the way or key dates along the way where the Bills will need to make decisions and what those decisions are. We will get to the All-22 review. That will absolutely happen. The NFL didn't release the film until early afternoon on Monday. And that's a long process for me. It's supposed to be available at 5 a.m., and usually I'm sitting there at 5 a.m. ready to download it and get started. So that way by 6, 7, 8 o'clock that night, I can do the podcast. But the tape wasn't available until later in the day. And so we'll get it to that today, and it'll be either the Wednesday episode or Thursday at the absolute latest. So all of that's still to come. We will get to it. But I want to start with this chief problem, and I want to address this through answering a herd mentality question that was submitted by Jason. Jason says, I'm at a loss for how to beat the Chiefs. Every year it seems they look unimpressive on a game-by-game basis, but yet they usually finish with a better record than the Bills and other more impressive-looking teams. When the playoffs come around, their level of execution from players and coaches go up to a level the Bills and others cannot match. They mitigate their weaknesses, exploit their opponents, and always dial up the right play in high-leverage situations on offense or defense. Also helpful that they're always on the right side of injury and officiating luck. What can we learn from them? Are they holding things back in the regular season to sprinkle in the playoffs? Are they just that much better at preparation, self-scouting, and play calling? Their players just mentally tougher and more clutch? I'm at a loss. Is there anyone you can think of who has been in that building that would be a good hire for us to try and help us discover their secret sauce? All right, let's get into it here. The biggest problem that the Buffalo Bills have is that the Kansas City Chiefs exist. And we're talking about arguably the greatest dynasty in NFL history. And of course, that coincides with exactly when the Bills are becoming a Super Bowl contender. The Chiefs have been to 7 consecutive AFC championship games. They've won 5 of those. They're playing in their 5th Super Bowl in 7 years. They've won 3, probably about to win their 4th. And there's no end in sight. There is no end in sight for this. Patrick Mahomes, arguably the greatest quarterback ever. Andy Reid, arguably the greatest head coach ever. Steve Spagnuolo, arguably the greatest defensive coordinator ever. And they're all in the same building running this Chiefs operation. It's a massive challenge for the Bills and, of course, the other 30 teams in the NFL. And, of course, the Bills are front and center because 4 out of the last 5 years, this has been the team that has ended the Bills' season. Now, the Bills have given them hell in the last 3 playoff matchups. You're talking about an overtime loss and then 2 3-point losses. And look, we have, and we will assess this Bills team. We'll talk about all the stuff. But everything that's an issue with the Bills is exacerbated because the Chiefs exist in their current form. This Bills team has been and is a Super Bowl caliber team. They just haven't been able to get past Kansas City in the playoffs. They've been in a great position to do it. 13 seconds, like I said, the last 2 games by 3 points each. And in both of those games, the Bills offense had a chance at the end of the game to win it on the final drive. You got to make the plays. I mean, what more can you ask for? Legit opportunities to do it. So, yes, you can talk about mistakes in trading up for Kyrie Elam. What looks like a mistake for trading up for Dalton Kincaid, although I don't think the book is written there. The Von Miller deal, whatever you want to point to that hasn't worked out as a try to get past the Chiefs move. Bills have obviously been close. And let's keep in mind that there is not a chasm between these two teams, despite everything I just said. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Steve Spagnuolo, all the success that they have, the Bills have been right there. And yeah, Kansas City has been able to kind of coast through the regular season. And even in doing so, they win games. They rely on experience. They know how to win. That combination, that trio of Mahomes, Reid, and Spags, they just figure it out. And a big benefit to their postseason runs has been, despite being able to coast through the regular season, they still get the first round bye. And when you have the first round bye, not only are you getting healthy and not exposing your players to injuries in addition to advancing without playing a game, it's a massive opportunity to self-scout, advance scout against your likely opponents, and develop those schematic wrinkles that are going to give you the edge in these games. Meanwhile, everyone else is game planning for a specific game. Think about this year in particular. Not only did the Chiefs get a first-round bye, they didn't do anything in Week 18. They had the number 1 seed clinched. They went ahead and took like a 38-0 loss to the Broncos and had this massive lead-up to get healthy, to self-scout, to advance scout, and develop those wrinkles. And obviously, this is a huge inventory of time that they've been together that they can kind of build off of a lot of different ideas that they've already been able to tinker with. Now, ideally, the Chiefs would have to fight more for their playoff positioning. Hasn't been the case. And they know how to win situational moments. They know how to win games. So what's the secret sauce? The secret sauce is Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, and Patrick Mahomes. I don't think there's any other piece of that organization that comes close to mattering like them. Their GM, Brett Veach, tons of mistakes. Tons of mistakes. They don't matter, though. They don't matter. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Felix Anduke-Uzoma, trading for Kadarius Toney, can't get the left tackle situation figured out. Don't have enough pass rush, need another corner. It doesn't matter for them. Because they have those 3 pillars in their organization that are probably the best to ever do it at their respective roles, and they're seasoned and experienced all at the same time on that team. So, yeah, they're same personnel blunders that every other team makes. They don't it doesn't matter. Patrick Mahomes is 30. Steve Spagnuolo is 65. Andy Reid is 66. Someone going to hire Steve Spagnuolo to be a head coach? I hope they would. He was a head coach 2009 through 11 with the Rams, and the Rams went 10-38. I mean, Pete Carroll just got hired at age 73 to be the head coach of the Raiders. Andy Reid's 66. I mean, there's no end in sight. I take comfort in knowing that the Bills have been unbelievably close. They've been knocking on the door, obviously. They've been close. It's not a chasm. Despite all of those advantages that I just said, the last 3 playoff matchups, overtime loss and two 3-point losses where the Bills had the ball at the end of the game with a chance to go on a game-winning drive. Make the plays. All right, coming up next, some of the big storylines out of locker room, clean-out day, some interesting comments from Von Miller, some things that Dawson Knox said about Dalton Kincaid, Micah Hyde, Jordan Phillips, Ty Johnson, some comments from Josh Allen I want to reflect on as well. Folks, be sure to stick with me. Super Bowl 59 is here. 2 teams, endless possibilities in the big game. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, folks, let's get into the notable comments coming out of locker room cleanout day. And we have yet to hear from Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane for their year-end press conference, which is one of my favorite things that they do because that's where you get the most candid versions of them. And you get a lot of honesty and kind of really a great opportunity to get some clues as to how they view the operation and maybe what's to come. So I'm excited for that to happen. I don't know when it will be, but we will certainly reflect on that as well in one of our next episodes that are coming up. But let's work through some of these notable storylines. I think the most interesting thing probably was Von Miller, and he's been pretty open about his future even after the game against the Chiefs and then during locker room cleanout. On his future, he said, quote, "However long my key card works in this building, I'm going to keep coming up in here, and I'm going to keep coming in and trying to make a Super Bowl happen. I want to be here. I plan on being a Buffalo Bill for sure." So obviously, there's a lot that goes into that. Von is certainly aging, and there's contract implications. He's certainly on the books. That's true. But here's the implications. Von Miller can be cut before June 1st, and the Bills would accumulate $15.4 million in dead cap space, and then they would generate $8.4 million in 2025 cap savings. The Bills could also designate him as a post-June 1st cut for $17.4 million in 2025 cap savings, but then you do have to spread out the dead cap, $6.4 million in dead cap in 2025, $9 million in dead cap in 2026. So there's a lot of implications there. You obviously can still keep him. That's possible. You could just keep him on his current deal. And then obviously you can rework the deal. And I'm sure that a lot of people are thinking, well, yeah, just redo the deal. No matter what you do with a reworked deal, the Bills are still on the hook to expense $15.4 million against the cap. So that's not going away, no matter what you do. So keep him as is, cut him, and take the $15.4 million dead cap hit right away for $8.4 million in savings, or you get a $17.4 million cap relief in 2025, but then you spread out the dead cap across 2025 and 26. I mean, so I think there's a lot to consider there, and we'll see what Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have to say about that. But Von obviously wants to continue in Buffalo. It has to make sense both ways, though. I really enjoyed listening to Dawson Knox. He had a lot of commentary about Dalton Kincaid, and I thought from a teammate and leader perspective, I thought Dawson Knox did a really good job of going to bat for his teammate. And obviously, Dalton Kincaid, we've talked about it, didn't have the season we hoped for. And obviously, he's a dud in the biggest moment of the year. And for all the debate on the final play, whether Josh should have thrown to Khalil Shakir, or if Mac Hollins could have caught the ball, or, the protection scheme was fooled and it should have slid the other direction. All of that's valid. All of it's valid. Just catch the ball, Dalton Kincaid. Just catch the ball. So obviously there's a lot of disappointment right now centered around Dalton Kincaid. Dawson Knox came to his defense and really praised the work ethic that he showed and revealed that he's played through some tough injuries. He's played through a torn PCL in one knee, and he said there's a ton of fluid buildup in the other knee. They don't even know what's wrong with it because he hasn't gotten imaging on it yet. So that's something to certainly be mindful of. The torn PCL didn't happen until later in the season. So that's something that I'm mindful of. It doesn't really explain all the chemistry issues that existed early on between him and Josh Allen. But obviously, it's not a happy time to reflect on Dalton Kincaid, but I think that's good perspective. And he's still an extremely talented football player, and I'm hopeful that he can become the player the Bills drafted him to become. We'll obviously have a lot more discussions on Kincaid throughout the offseason. Jordan Phillips came out and said, I'm not retiring, but this is the only place that I'm going to play. And so it's nice to know that you have that in your back pocket. If the Bills want to keep Jordan Phillips, he'd be back, I would assume, on a pretty modest deal, considering there's no one to compete against. But obviously the Bills need to look to retool this defensive tackle rotation. It's a healthy draft, and probably need a veteran or two and a draft pick or two to really round this thing out and get it to the level that it needs to be. To the surprise of nobody, Micah Hyde shared with beat reporters that he is officially retiring. I'm going to be interested to hear from Sean McDermott on this to see if there's any plan for him to come back as a coach in some capacity. Obviously, he wants to be around the team. Certainly not playing, and I think that became pretty clear this year that he didn't come back to play. He came to be a benefit to the locker room, but perhaps throughout that, it was kind of a little introduction to, hey, you want to feel this out and see if you do want to be part of this coaching mix. This is kind of that grind and what it looks like, and there's probably a lot to consider from both Micah Hyde's side of that equation to the Bills side of that equation to see if that's something that they want to explore. Ty Johnson, who's set to become an unrestricted free agent on his return to Buffalo, Ty Johnson said, I got to talk to my agent, but I love Buffalo. Ty Johnson's been able to stick around on some pretty modest deals as he had a pretty quiet start to his career. Didn't stick with the Lions, didn't stick with the Jets, found a home in Buffalo, and now it's no longer a situation where he comes back on a minimum type contract. There's probably a little bit of a boost or pay raise that's going to come with it. And we'll see if it works out. I think he became obviously a very valuable member of this team for his third down capabilities as a pass blocker and as a receiver, occasionally running the football, kick return. He does a lot. He wears a lot of hats for this team and really helps round out the backfield and complement James Cook. And so I'd love for him to be back, and we'll see if the money works for both sides of that equation. And then we'll get to Josh Allen here. And Josh talked for, I think, almost 20 minutes. And I have just enjoyed so much listening to him reflect. Obviously, I don't want the sad part, doesn't excite me, but there's a maturity with Josh Allen. There's a leadership component that really is impressive. And, even when he was asked about Dalton Kincaid just being the ultimate leader that Josh Allen is, Josh Allen said, I've got to be better for Dalton Kincaid. He can sit there and think about that play over and over, but I've got to be better for him. He's been battling through bumps and bruises, games he shouldn't have been in. He's a tough sucker. And then he really went in and got very specific on some ball placement things that he could have been better with that would have helped Dalton Kincaid. And I am not necessarily saying that Josh Allen is 100% correct, that something he could have done would have really changed the dynamics for Dalton Kincaid this year. But that's what a leader does. That's what a leader does. And obviously, there's a lot of opportunity for this to really take off in the ways that it was intended to. And I do think a lot of that happening is, of course, Kincaid now getting healthy, but also establishing that chemistry with Josh Allen. And I thought that was an incredible way to answer that question. I also really like this quote from Josh Allen when asked about the Chiefs. He said, "We're constantly knocking at the door. And when you're playing a team like the Chiefs, you can't just knock. You've got to kick down the door. You have to go take it." I think Josh is right. And the opportunities have been there to take it. Just make the freaking play. And they've been there to be made. They've absolutely been there to be made. Of course, 13 seconds, Coach McDermott obviously blew the end of that game. There's no question about it. But you had your chances the last two times to make the play. Got to make the play. You just got to. And I feel like so much perspective is going to be lost talking about this being like a Mount Everest situation. It's really not. They're right there, despite everything I talked about in that first segment. They're right there. Make the play. All right, coming up on the other side of it, the Bills made some roster moves already. They've signed some future deals. And I had a great question from Kate about the offseason and what it looks like. And so I kind of want to navigate what it looks like for the NFL and the decisions that the Bills have to make along the way. Folks, be sure to stick with me. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can also help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to find those qualified candidates. There's no wonder that 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, folks, the Bills have already started making some moves here. They've signed some players to futures deals. And let me tell you what a futures deal is. It's players that didn't finish the season on a 53-man roster that can go ahead and sign like a minimum type deal that doesn't really ever include like a massive signing bonus or guaranteed money to go ahead and lock themselves into a spot on a 90-man roster. And usually these are practice squad players. And so the Bills announced that they have signed the following players to futures deals. Cornerback Corey Couch, cornerback Daquan Hardy, who was a draft pick in 2024, defensive tackle Zion Logue, offensive lineman Mike Edwards, offensive lineman Richard Garage, running back Frank Gore Jr., and wide receiver KJ Hamler. So those are all practice squad players that have already secured a spot on the 90-man roster that will give them a chance, to go through the offseason and compete for a roster spot. And if not, potentially be back on the practice squad. So those are players we know because they've been on the team. The Bills also added 2 players already to futures deals that were not with the Bills this season. Tight end Armani Rogers and punter Jake Camarda. Armani Rogers, the tight end, he was actually a college quarterback that has transitioned to tight end. He's 27 years old, spent his first 2 years with the Commanders, and then split time between the Eagles and Falcons last year. I don't know that there's a ton of ceiling there, given the transition, given his age, given his newness to the position. He's had some injuries as well, but he's at least interesting. And then Jake Camarda was a 2022 4th-round pick by the Buccaneers out of Georgia as a punter. That's a pretty high pick as a punter. And he was the Bucs punter for the 2022 and 2023 seasons. So 2 years of established time as a punter. Certainly had some ups and downs, and he actually was released during this year. And it's funny, one of the guys that ultimately replaced him was Jack Browning. Jack Browning was the competition for Sam Martin, who was with the Bills during the offseason, and Browning actually he struggled a lot as the Bucs punter. But what's interesting here is that obviously he's talented, young, recent 4th-round draft pick as a punter, has some experience. With Sam Martin, there is an opportunity to get out of his deal. The Bills could release him for $1.8 million in cap savings. They would accumulate just $400,000 in dead cap to move on from Sam Martin. So, not sure if that's what the Bills are going to do or not. They had opportunities to get out of his deal going into this past year, and they didn't. So they might be committed to Sam Martin, but if nothing else, they have some level of competition already in the mix. And look, there will be more futures deals that are announced. There's a lot more players that you're probably thinking of that have been on the practice squad. Those will get announced within the next few days, I would expect. Also, the Bills shared that they've re-signed offensive lineman Ryan Vandemark. Don't have the terms on his deal. He was set to be an exclusive rights free agent, which pretty much guarantees that he'll be back. In fact, he doesn't even have a choice. If you're an exclusive rights free agent, you either are back with the team or you don't play that season. So that's kind of the spot that Vandemark was in. We don't have the terms of the deal. Same thing with Alec Anderson. He's an exclusive rights free agent, but we that one wasn't announced as an extension yet. So we'll see. But Ryan Vandemark already back in the fray for 2025. All right, would love to address this question here from Kate that will take us on a bit of a journey of what the next several months look like for the NFL and the decisions that the Bills have to make. So Kate says, despite being an everydayer for 3 years now, I have off-season amnesia. Would you be able to walk us through the timeline of the next couple months? We sign players to futures contracts today. What comes next? Free agents, draft cuts? Just like a nice run-through to get us to the 90-man roster. That would be helpful. Thank you. Glad to do it, Kate. Great opportunity to navigate through this. So let me work through the big dates, if you will. So right now, obviously, this is where you'll start to get some futures contracts, et cetera, et cetera. The first date to be mindful of is February 18th. That is the date where teams can start designating franchise players. I don't think the Bills will have a franchise player, but that's at least when things get interesting around the league for guys that could get a franchise tag and those trade conversations start to heat up. That is interesting. February 24th through March 3rd, that is the NFL scouting combine, where in Indianapolis, 250 plus prospects go to Indy, they work out, they test, they meet with teams. It's a big moment in the NFL calendar, and it really kind of sets the tone for the draft season. March 4th is the deadline to put the franchise tag on players. So that's obviously that window of February 18th to March 4th. You find out which players across the league are going to get the franchise tag. On March 10th, the legal tampering period opens. So that's when teams are free to negotiate contracts with players that are set to become free agents. So you'll start to, find out who the Bills are going to sign in free agency. Then March 12th is when the new league year starts. And that's when those contracts that are negotiated in the legal tampering period can become official, and also the moment where you have to become cap compliant. And what's going to be nice about this offseason is the Bills are entering the offseason with cap space, as opposed to the last several years it's been having to make moves, releasing players, restructuring contracts to become cap compliant. Now, how much cap space is unknown because the league has not announced what the salary cap will be. And so there's some variance from what you're seeing. Some of the reports are, they're $20-30 million different. So we'll see where that lands. But I think a reasonable expectation would be that the Bills would have between $15 and $30 million in available cap space before they make any moves. They could certainly do restructures. They can release players. They can do different things to create more cap space. We'll talk about all of that. But that's when you have to become cap compliant by the start of the new league year on March 12th. Then on April 7th, teams with new head coaches, they can begin their offseason workouts. Teams that have a returning head coach like the Bills, they can start their offseason workouts on April 21st. The NFL draft is April 24th through 26th. The Bills have picks 30, 56, 62, 108, 131, 171, 175, 179, 206, and 208. So healthy amount of draft picks for the Bills. The picks 171 and 175 are projected compensatory picks for Leonard Floyd and Gabe Davis. And some of those numbers might change once the compensatory picks become final, but 30, 56, and 62 will not. 30 and 62 are the Bills' organic first and second round picks. 56 is the pick that the Bills got from Houston for Stephon Diggs. And so obviously the draft will be a big opportunity for the Bills to add young talent to the roster. We'll certainly do a lot to get ready for that. The May 1st is another one. That's the deadline to exercise the fifth-year option for the 2022 first-round draft picks. The decision that the Bills have to make is really not a decision because Kyer Elam is the player that this applies to. And if the Bills were to pick up the fifth-year option on Kyer Elam, they'd lock themselves into $11.7 million in salary for Kyer Elam in 2026, which obviously is not going to happen. So that's pretty much not a deadline, but I at least want to acknowledge that that's what the Bills have to decide on. And then you have rookie camp May 2nd through 5th or May 9th through 12th. The Bills can choose either slot for their rookie camp, so all the draft picks, and then, of course, your tryout players, your undrafted free agents. This is where the Bills found Joe Andreessen. So that'll be – I don't know which one it'll be for the Bills, either the 2nd through the 5th or 9th through 12th of May. And then really in that window from like May, June, that's when your OTAs begin, your organized team activities. We don't have the dates on those. The Bills will schedule those and make an announcement. And then training camp starts in late July, preseason games, and then early September, week 1 of the 2025 season. And the Bills will rally and go on another run. It'll come fast, folks. And I mean, I love the season. I really do. I love the offseason too. I really do. It's fun to consider all the decisions and team building conversations. And, you know, this will be my 7th off season doing this, and it's a daily podcast. And so nothing changes in terms of that frequency in the off season. So we'll make this a year-long conversation. And, you know, I have a lot of creative ideas, a lot of staples that I've done every off season. They'll be back this year, and some new ideas as well. So come along for the ride. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.